Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming this afternoon. We are happy to have everybody here. A little bit of retreat before the big storm that's going to be coming in a couple of days here, so enjoy it while you can. This is really a very big day for us, obviously. This is our first public introduction of the orchestra, and so we want to go through a little bit of information about what has occurred up to this point, give you a little bit of background as to how we've gotten to where we are, and also then discuss a little bit about where we're going from this point, moving into our inaugural season, which will be in 2017-2018. So from here I'm going to go through a brief presentation, and we will have a little bit of performance with Quartet 212 as we and to break this up a little bit so you don't have to listen to me talk the whole time. And then as we finish up, there will be a question and answer session and some refreshments at the back of the hall. So, a little bit of history to music and the original Montclair Orchestra. There was a Montclair Orchestra prior to this organization. Back in the early part of the 20th century, there was a number of performing groups in this area, and there was one around 1920 that was actually called the Montclair Orchestra. And they performed in 1922 at the Montclair Art Museum. There are still records of that performance. From that group, and also some other groups that were in this area, Maplewood and South Orange, they merged together, moved to Newark, and became what is now known as the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra, the largest orchestra in the state. So clearly, there is some precedent for music and orchestra in Montclair. As far as the actual music programs that we do have in Montclair, it's a very, very wide, diverse range of music, everything from jazz to pop to classical. Certainly, this is not the extended list of everything that's here in town, but the Montclair Jazz Festival and Jazz House Kids, very, very big, well-known festival that happens every summer. Through Montclair State University, the John J. Cowley School of Music has really taken off, and they have performances with chamber groups, faculty chamber groups, faculty ensembles, individual recitals, as well as the Montclair State University Symphony. Peak Performances is another program which is run through MSU at the Castor Theater up there, and they bring in a number of chamber performances, different types of performance art pieces from all over the world. Outpost in the Burbs, a fairly wide range of music that gets put on by that program. Montclair Music Club, I know there's a few members here today. This is a group of amateur and semi-professional and professional musicians that get together monthly to play for each other in a kind of informal setting. Just an opportunity for people to do what they do when it comes to music. Then Opera Theater of Montclair has been around for a few years now as a smaller opera production company, doing smaller stage productions in a very unique way in some unique settings around town. The Montclair Operetta Club doing some older musical type works, etc. The Montclair Community Band, run by Jim Wasco over at the high school, has been around for a number of years, putting on free performances and sponsored through the Department of Recreation. Unity Concerts, which is not around anymore, but was run for, I think it was about 80 years or so, through the Unitarian Church. Unity Concerts brought in groups from literally all over the world, and we had up at the high school several play. I believe the Cleveland Orchestra had performed at the high school. London Symphony has played at Montclair High School, so there are big, world-renowned organizations that have come to Montclair. And then, of course, the Wellmont Theater, which everybody is familiar with. It's a destination theater for acts coming into town, more usually in the pop variety, but there are some other opportunities there as well. Now, as far as the actual musicians in Montclair, we have a wide range of people here. We have members from the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra that live here in Montclair. We have members of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra that live in Montclair, members of the New York Philharmonic that live in Montclair, and I have identified in particular Oscar Ravina because he was part of that Unity concert series, which I know Dr. Bannerman here in the audience was involved with, and he worked extensively with Mr. Avina in putting on a lot of those programs and bringing that level of performance here to Montclair. We have composers in town. I've just listed a few here. Dr. Aldridge, who is also the director of the Mason Gross School for the Arts down at Rutgers. He's a Grammy award-winning composer. He's had a couple of operas in particular that have received very wide acclaim. George Walker is a very well-known, very influential African-American composer still here in town. He was the first African-American composer to win a Pulitzer Prize for music. And then Tom Parenti, another well-known composer here in town, who's been very involved in the school systems. But Mr. Parenti has had a number of his works also performed and premiered, both in Montclair as well as in other venues around this area. And then as far as performers, again, ranging from classical on through jazz and into pop, you see Terrence Wilson, who is a Grammy-nominated concert pianist. He's played with a number of major symphony orchestras around the country. Melissa Walker and Christian McBride, extraordinarily well-known jazz musicians that work with and run Jazz House Kids. Joe Walsh, of course, of the Eagles, has been very visible in town here lately, in particular. And then, of course, Steve Turre, who is the trombonist from the Saturday Night Live band. So we really do run the gamut of the number of folks that are here in town. So a lot of people we can choose from and work with as we get going. So before I really tell you what the orchestra is, I'm kind of going to go through a little bit of what we aren't. So there's lots of different orchestras out there. There are community orchestras, and we are not specifically a community orchestra. Do we represent the community? Yes. Are we involved in the community? Yes. But we bring in different components that don't make us strictly a community orchestra. We're not a student orchestra. We're going to be working with university and conservatory students, but we're not strictly a student orchestra. Student orchestras have a different preparation cycle. And we're not a professional orchestra. There are numerous, I list the NJSO and the New York Philharmonic here, but there are numerous professional ensembles in this area which can provide a traditional concert experience. And that is something that they're very good at. What we are looking to do is something a little bit different than what you might see from one of those types of organizations. We are not specifically a jazz orchestra. A lot of people look at us and they say, "Oh, so do you do a jazz set?" No, we might be able to do some jazzy work, but that's not. We're not a jazz orchestra. We're not specifically a symphony orchestra. We are not a pops orchestra. So if that's not what we are, what are we? We're an orchestra that's designed for whatever music is being played. If we put together a program, we are going to put together an ensemble that matches that program. So that may be a large symphony orchestra. It may be a jazz type ensemble. There's lots of different components to what we will bring in. As far as the musicians, I said we're not a community, we're not a student, we're not a professional orchestra. We're a blend of those things. And that's something that's actually fairly unique to the music industry. This is one of the only places where something like this can really happen, because we do have so much talent to draw from, both with professional musicians in this area, whether it's the folks from the major orchestras or through some of the freelance musicians that are in this region, as well as students from the Cali School of Music at Montclair State. We also have worked with the Mason Gross School for the Arts down at Rutgers. And then, of course, going a little further abroad, you have the students in Manhattan at places like Juilliard, the Manhattan School of Music at Manus. So there's lots of different people there. And then the amateurs. Here in Montclair, we have access to amateurs which are of a very high level, a very high caliber. And so, again, something that most places around, I'll say around the country anyways, you don't necessarily see. So we are able to draw from that local talent, those local amateurs, the students and the professionals. And what we will do is we'll provide a connection between the schools, various institutions around town, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, as well as other organizations in town. And what we want to be is a cultural icon for Montclair. Montclair has developed a reputation as an arts destination in northern New Jersey. We're looking to add to that and fill a void that's there as far as the traditional orchestra community is involved. So how did this whole project start? The whole thing started first back in February of 2016, so a little over a year ago. Discussions began, and my wife was laughing. She said, "You mean when we started talking about it?" So we moved around. We came into town. We've been here for about 2 years. And one of the things that drew us to Montclair was the cultural aspect and the art support that we see here. So as we got more involved in town, we started asking, well, what about the orchestra scene? What about classical music and that sort of thing? And what we found was that there just wasn't a lot of extensive discussion about it, to the point that when we spoke to people we had met, everybody kind of had a light click on in their head to say, oh yeah, why don't we have an orchestra? We have all these other things in town. How is that possible? So those discussions began in February 2016. In March, we reached out to the Cali School of Music up in Montclair State, and a connection was made there. MSU became a big supporter of what we were doing and wanted to play a role in the development of the organization. By May, we had selected our initial board, because we decided if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. If we're going to put on an ensemble, we're going to have a business plan, which I wrote out. We're going to have an 18-month plan for putting this whole thing together. And part of the first portion of that was putting together our board. So in May, we actually identified all of our initial board members, and then in June of last year, we had our first board meeting when the organization was officially formed. From there, things kind of started to take a little more shape. In August, we incorporated officially in New Jersey as a New Jersey nonprofit. And then the next big phase really started when we decided we know that we have lots of talent around. We are all either involved in music or we're interested in music, but we're not the person or people to be the music director. So we decided we were going to actually launch a formal music director search. And that process went on for a few months. We expected to receive maybe 20 or 30 applicants for the position, knowing that it wasn't a full-time position. We received nearly 100. And that was from people all over the country, or all over the world, actually. We did receive a number of international applicants. We received some assistant conductors and associate conductors from major orchestras around the country, including the Atlanta Symphony and the Los Angeles Philharmonic. So clearly, the reputation of Montclair reaches beyond the border of the town. So after that point in October, as all this was going on, we finally got everything together to be able to put together our 501c3 filings, make sure that everything was done properly to form the official IRS nonprofit. And then going back to the music director, in November of 2016, we came to a decision on David Chan as our music director, and of course you'll be hearing from David a little bit later in this presentation, and you'll be hearing his quartet play here. Almost done. From there, December 2016, we started our first pledge drive. Because we didn't have our 501c3 in place yet, we had submitted the applications, but it takes time. We did our first pledge drive so that we could start putting together a picture of our finances and what the orchestra was going to be. And then in February of 2017, so just last month, we did get the confirmation back on the 501c3 to get everything in place and actually start processing those nonprofit donations. March 2017, we're almost here. This was actually just in the past week. We held auditions, and this was an extensive process. We went over 4 days. We have a total roster right now of auditionees that have signed up, or that had signed up, of about 225 musicians in the area. And of that, we didn't have time to hear 225 people, but we did listen to, I don't have the exact tally, but we probably listened to roughly about 110 of those folks. And there's an opportunity for us to listen to other folks in the future. But this is an opportunity for us to hear people that we don't know, learn more about the talent that's out there, the folks that are out there that wanted to be involved in this process and continue to produce the best ensemble we could. And that brings us, of course, to today, which is the official public introduction of the orchestra. And from here, we start moving into what's going to happen in the inaugural season. So now, who is involved? There is a board of directors, as I mentioned. I'm the president of the organization and the chairman of the board. David Chan is our music director, and then our board of directors and special advisors for the organization. So John Basinger, who's an attorney with Saul Ewing, Dr. Robert Card, who is the director of the Cali School of Music up at MSU. Rose Cali, who some of you know from town, is a philanthropist and art supporter here in Montclair. Ted Stammis, who is an attorney and general counsel for Citibank, and then my wife, Christina Wecker, who is an accountant with PricewaterhouseCoopers. So in addition to the board, we've also had a number of volunteers involved, and I certainly can't go through the number of people, but people that have been assisting with marketing, with development, certainly spreading the word, and then, of course, with fundraising. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, and then I'm going to turn the program over to David to continue and actually listen to some music. I am the president of the orchestra. I have a degree from Boston University. I have a Bachelor of Music in Orchestral Performance. Once upon a time, I don't do it anymore, but I used to play the bassoon. So for those of you that are not of a music background, it's the one that's big and long and brown, and you hold like this. I had the opportunity back in 2010, after I had a career in the environmental remediation industry, and back in 2010, I retired from that industry, when our third child was born, so I became stay-home dad. And during that time, I returned back to music, not through bassoon, but through piano, which I also play, and got involved in a number of things. One of the big ones was which was establishing a chamber music group called Sky Pro Musica down in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we were living at the time. From there, we moved around a little bit, came here, and of course I am a Montclair resident, and I have 3 kids here in the Montclair Public Schools, all 3 at Northeast Elementary, and I am a regular volunteer with the music programs at the schools. So that's about as much as you need to hear about me, because I'm not the interesting one here. I'm going to turn the program over now to David and introduce David Chan, who is our music director, and I will let him speak to you about his background and where we're going from here.
Thank you, Andre. It's very nice to see all of you here. I can't express how thrilled I am to be part of this new project, to be the first music director of the Montclair Orchestra, and I look forward to exciting seasons ahead. I've been spending unprecedented amounts of time, for me at any rate, in Montclair, and look forward to doing much more in the future. But just to tell you a little bit about myself, I did my bachelor's at Harvard University and then got my master's at the Juilliard School, where I am also currently a faculty member. And I've been concertmaster of the Met Orchestra since 2000, so I'm in my 17th season. And another big part of my resume, although at the time it was kind of more a labor of love and a pet project for me, is the festival that I co-founded in the Burgundy region of France. And this is a music and wine festival called Musique et Vin au Clos Vougeot, music and wine at the Clos Vougeot, which is the 13th century castle that's really the landmark and symbolic heart of the wine-producing region in Burgundy. So that's been going on for 10 years. We celebrate our 10th season this year, and one of the things I brought to the board of the Montclair Orchestra when applying for music director was that I've had some experience with new organizations taking an idea for a new musical entity and helping nurture it in its early going until it has a chance to become something bigger and better. So that's really what we hope to do here. Why did I want to be a part of this? The chance to be a part of something new. So, like in Burgundy, when you start a new orchestra like this, you have the chance to go outside the box. You see here ability and flexibility to go outside the box. When you run a New York Philharmonic or a New Jersey Symphony, you may get the chance to try something that you've always wanted to try. And you fight the board for years, fight the management for years, and finally they agree to it. And in return, you have to do 17 other programs exactly of the variety that they normally already see and that that audience expects. And that's fully understandable because the large amount of money it takes to move such organizations, the people who front that money, they're used to seeing certain programs. That's in their comfort zone. And you have to give them what they want. Here, quote unquote, going outside the box, that's what we're all about. We have not only the chance to do that, this is really our niche to do something that will separate us from the others. Now, a little later when I introduce the programs for next season, you might say, wait a second, he talked about going outside the box, and a lot of those pieces I can see on such and such other programs. That may be true, but the venues we're playing in and what we have to go through to make these programs happen, and hopefully the line of thought that I'll explain in constructing those programs is a little different than just putting greatest classical hits on a program and going with that. And finally, the opportunity to give back to the community. I live in northern New Jersey myself. My wife, Catherine, who's part of the quartet, I'll introduce them in a minute, but we've lived in Bergen County for 10 years now. And even though we're in Essex County here, I still feel that being music director of an orchestra in northern New Jersey is part of my own community. So really the opportunity to participate in something new and not exactly in the same standard old box in an area of the country that I live in, it really means a lot to me. Now to introduce the music you'll hear today, we're going to play the Debussy String Quartet. And we're going to do it in two parts so that we can continue with the presentation, just so that you have music at regular intervals rather than all at once and then just more blabbing from us. But I thought the Debussy Quartet would be perfect for this occasion for a number of reasons. One, the Montclair Art Museum has a big Matisse exhibit this year. And Matisse was greatly inspired by all kinds of music, and Debussy was a particular inspiration. So that's one connection. Another is, when you hear the music of Claude Debussy, you think, oh yeah, the French school. You hear these impressionistic sounds. What's hard to remember now is what he was writing then was utterly new. This string quartet was the first time the particular types of harmonies and colors that you're going to hear were ever used in music. And he did this not with a giant orchestra, which he did later with pieces like La Mer or Image, but he did it with a string quartet, 4 instruments that can only bow and pluck. I'm borrowing the words of my colleague Dov Shinlin, who pointed that out. 4 instruments that can only bow and pluck, and yet he invented this palette of colors and sounds that was never before heard. I love to make comparisons between music and wine. I risk, if I get too far into it, that you won't ever leave, and particularly with no glasses of wine in hand, that would just be unfair. So let me just give you one in particular that I like, is that both music and wine you can just enjoy on a very casual level. You can sip a perfectly friendly, neutral glass of wine while talking to somebody else without paying attention to what you're drinking, just like you can have music in the background at a party or in a hotel lobby, and it gives you ambiance without necessarily demanding that you pay special attention to it. But I'm assuming most of you that are here have at least a particular interest in music. You know that when you pay attention to music, it gives you extra rewards. And the same thing with fine wine. When you pay close attention, it reveals more than if you know less about it. So I point this out because my favorite wine region being Burgundy, which is where I have the festival, the reason why for me Burgundy is the best wine in the world is it combines pure sensual pleasure of delicious taste with the fact that if you know a lot about the region, the intellectual component of that knowledge feeding into what you're tasting reveals more. And I feel the Debussy Quartet is much like that, because for musicologists, historians, they can spend hours pointing out how this structure is revolutionary and how this had never been done before. And, oh, it's cyclical format, where in the last movement, all the themes from the previous movements come back. And that's all fascinating, but at the same time, just the sheer sensuousness of the sound is almost orchestral. So here we are with 4 players playing in lieu of an orchestra today, because we don't yet have the completed Montclair Orchestra to present to you. We have my quartet of players from the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra. We call ourselves Quartet 212, and this refers, of course, to the area code of New York, or what used to be before 7 other area codes came in, but also the fact that we played our first concert together, all 4 of us at the same time, in Burgundy in the year 2012. And we played in the town of Beaune, where the postal code is 21200. So this is the Metropolitan Opera meets the Montclair Orchestra. And in this first segment, we'll play the first 2 movements. Animé et très décidé, which means lively or animated and very determined. And assez vif et bien rythmé, so very vital and very rhythmic. And the first movement introduces a lot of the themes, very dramatic, that you'll hear throughout the piece. And the second movement, there's a lot of pizzicato, where the instrument is plucked and has a very, jazzy is the wrong word, but almost jazzy sort of rhythmic component to it. So here is the first half of the Debussy String Quartet with Quartet 212, with Catherine Rowe, violin, Dov Shinlin, viola, Rafael Figueroa, cello, and myself on violin as well. Thank you.
now I feel guilty getting back up here because now, after hearing that, you have to listen to me talk again. All right, so we're going to continue a little bit further in the presentation, and now we're going to talk about where we go from here. So we're jumping right back into it. The makeup of the orchestra, this is a traditional orchestra, symphony orchestra, if you will, a full orchestra, but again, flexible in our size and scope depending on the type of music we're playing, the period of music we're playing, etc. So it's a traditional orchestra with the flexibility and the ability to do more. So you take a look at what a traditional orchestra, full orchestra, would be consisted of, and this is, these are not exact numbers, but kind of an average typical orchestra, like for instance, the New York Philharmonic. Violins, you have about 30 violins, including 16 first violins and then 14 second violins, 12 violas, 12 celli, the plural of cello, 8 double bass, 4 flutes, including piccolo, 4 clarinets, including E-flat clarinet, bass clarinet, oboes, 4, including an English horn, bassoons, 4, including a contrabassoon, 5, 6, 7, 8 could be French horns, trumpets, 3 could be more, trombones, 3, including a bass trombone, a tuba, timpani, 2, sometimes more percussionists, harp, piano. That is the New York Philharmonic on stage. That is how many members there are of a full symphony orchestra. It's a lot of people on stage. So what that looks like is, about typically about 95 musicians. And again, our musicians are going to consist of the local amateurs, conservatory and university students, so whether these are students from MSU, from the Cali School of Music, or from Mason Gross down at Rutgers, or even, again, across the river in Manhattan at Juilliard Manhattan School of Music, Manus, etc., and the professionals, like we mentioned. On top of the musicians, we have librarians. Believe it or not, that is a huge job in an orchestra, making sure the music is all laid out and prepared and prepared for the musicians. A personnel manager, because David does not want to be dealing individually with all of these musicians, asking where are they supposed to be and where are their paychecks. Stage manager, a box office manager, a music director, of course. There's a lot of people involved in a full orchestra. So on top of the actual musicians, we also rely heavily on volunteers moving forward. Again, for things like marketing, related services, development and fundraising type operations, promotion, general operations, things like stage setup, concert services such as ushering and box office services. There's a lot of opportunities for volunteers to get involved. Now, where are we going to play? Starting out in our first season, and probably for the first couple of seasons, we will be primarily in Montclair. From there is, of course, the possibility we could expand out a little bit from directly within the township. But some of the places we've looked at, Montclair State University, there are 3 venues there that we are looking at. There's Memorial Auditorium, which is their hall, their large auditorium hall that holds about 1,000 people. The Castle Theater, which is their newest space, actually a very, very good space for what we are looking for. It's about a 500 seat venue. And then Leschwitz Hall at the Cali School of Music itself is about a 250-seat hall, smaller but very, very good for chamber-type performances, so smaller ensembles. So past MSU, Montclair Kimberly Academy has a couple of very nice venues to play in, and we are looking at the upper school, if you're familiar with the halls there. We're looking at the upper school for one of our performances. Montclair schools, we are looking at the high school, although it is on the larger side. It's about I believe, 1,500 seat, roughly around there, auditorium, so a little bit larger than we're looking for. And then also possibly up at Buzz Aldrin School, where they have about a 500 seat theater there as well. So we may do some work within the schools. Eventually, we want to be able to do some free concerts in the park. I know that's always a hit for a lot of people. Brookdale Summer Series used to regularly have an orchestral performance during the summer. That's something we would like to see come back. So whether it's there, whether it's down in Nishwain Park, whether it's at Anderson Park up in Upper Montclair, where you have access to those to all of the shops and restaurants there, there's lots of different places where we could hold outdoor venues. St. Luke's Church, we are looking at for a number of reasons. It's about the right size, but also because of the history. As I mentioned, the original Montclair Orchestra back in 1922, where it first formed was at St. Luke's Church. So we're looking at that as a connection as well. Immaculate Conception is a very nice large Roman Catholic, almost cathedral, if you will. It's about the right size for our audience, but because of, if you're familiar with the church, it's a lot of marble, a lot of stone. It's very resonant. So if we put a full orchestra in there, you probably will not have eardrums when we're done. So if we do something at Immaculate Conception, again, we'll be on the smaller side, maybe some of our chamber performances and that sort of thing, Baroque music, older music. The Salvation Army Citadel holds about 350 people and actually is used at times by the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra as a training or as a rehearsal space. So we are very familiar with the people at the Salvation Army, and we may be using them either for rehearsal as well as for certain types of concert situations as well. First Congregational Church here now, just next door. Again, another well-used space. I think Outpost in the Burbs uses their facility on a fairly regular basis. And then possibly at some point we may look at the Wellmont. It's a big space right now. The way it's configured, because it's designed more for pop rock type concerts. The acoustics are not really designed for our type of ensemble. That may change depending on. There's been numerous discussion about the redevelopment and the various projects, both at the Wellmont as well as the Seymour Street redevelopment project. So depending on what happens with those types of venues, those types of areas, there may be some additional places as far as venues to play. Now, what about the music? Classical, I hate using the word classical because classical is a period. It's not a type of music. What you just heard was not what some people may consider classical music. Your typical person on the street, if you say the word classical music, may think of Vivaldi and the Four Seasons. Great as piece as it is, that is not what all classical music is. So I say classical, but knowing what we mean is orchestral, traditional orchestral music. Modern orchestral music, so that could be some really contemporary works and stuff that really stretches the imagination from what somebody would typically encounter in a orchestral setting. Popular music, always good, and that I would suspect you will see if we do those concerts, those summer concert series, etc. Some of that type of music. Children's programs, we do want to get to the point that we can put on children's concerts. Some of the schools here in Montclair I know do go to see the New Jersey Symphony, but not all of them. When they do children's programs, we would like to be able to get to the point that we can put on children's programs for the kids in the Montclair public schools as well as possibly some of the other schools around. And then film music, and we'll talk about some of the collaborations we're doing, but film music is very, very popular. If any of you are familiar with Game of Thrones, it's not film, it's TV, I suppose. You talk about the music from Game of Thrones. A lot of people who follow the show know it really well. There's actually a tour going around the country of the composer of that music that they sell out concert halls just playing that music, just playing the Game of Thrones music. And a lot of people say, well, yeah, but that's different. That's not orchestral music. Well, who do you think plays that music? That's an orchestra. So there's, in a lot of ways, film music is like the opera music of today. Now, the programming for 2017 is 5 concerts. We have a lot of varied programming, and since I am not the music director, this is really what David's been spending a lot of time on, and as I've heard, losing some sleep on. He's been the one that's been really working on this, so I want to turn this over to David to talk us through what the first season is really going to look like.
Thank you, Andre. So yes, I'm very excited about the first season. There are a lot of future collaborations, which Andre's already referred to, possible joint ventures with the Art Museum, with the Film Festival in town, new music. The thing is, a lot of these relationships take time to nurture, to figure out what's of mutual artistic interest to both parties. new music costs a lot of money. The chances of a young composer writing us something for nothing is nil, basically. The kind of Van Gogh model of artistic creation is not so encouraged these days. So, for new music, the whole commissioning process where the composer can be paid and guaranteed certain performing rights and stipulations, this is all, there's a lot of contractual legal stuff that goes into it. So within our limitations for the first season, budget being another one, I wanted to still find a way to present music that has great lasting value, number one, but number two also provides a variety of different sounds and looks. When I meet with people who learn about this new project, they assume that our programming will be mostly chamber orchestra size, 40 to 50 players. And to be honest, when I signed on, that's what I expected at first also. But when I sat down with a notepad and paper and I started to sketch out programs that could be done with that formation, you start to come up with a lot of Haydn, Mozart, Mendelssohn programs. Music which I love dearly and I will never get tired of. But to the unindoctrinated public that doesn't necessarily know how exciting that music can be, they will see those types of programs on paper and say, oh, more of that. So what I wanted to do was create programs that had a little bit more thematic connection to offer than that. Different size forces, different instrumentations. So even if parents want to bring their kids to a concert and say, remember the last concert where we saw such and such instrument play? Well, now we have this, just to explore different sounds. And yeah, these sorts of collaborations will, in the long run, I think, pay dividends. So let me just introduce quickly the programs. These are working titles, not official ones that we'll necessarily publish, but I call our very first program Operatic Connections, because this is music that really comes from where I've been the last 2 decades of my career. Starting with one of the greatest opera overtures, Verdi's Overture to La Forza del Destino. And this came about because Andre said to me, for the first concert, we should really get their attention with something. And if you don't know this piece, the 3 loud brass chords that start the piece, they'll get your attention. So going on from that, Mozart, this symphony is not operatic, but every single piece Mozart ever wrote has opera running through its veins. So this is a piece of his youth, sunny, sprightly, very just lovable in every way. And then Mahler's 4th Symphony, every piece that Mahler wrote has a very large shadow of death over it, excepting maybe this one. There's a ghostly dance in the second movement, played by a strangely tuned violin, but otherwise it's his most beautiful, sunniest piece, and it has, in the last movement, a soprano solo, which brings us full circle to the opera connection. So that concert is going to take about 80 players. The second concert is mostly strings and will take only 25 players. So we have a piece by Hervé Pert called Fratres, which is a minimalist piece. He composes in a style where everything is like the ringing of bells. And this piece exists in numerous arrangements. This one is for strings and percussion. So there's a string orchestra and one percussionist playing the claves and bass drum. And I call this program Change because it explores change at different rates. In this minimalist piece, it occurs in the slowest, most glacial sort of way possible. And it's followed by Richard Strauss's Metamorphosen, one of his very last compositions, where he takes one opening theme and over the course of the piece's 25 minutes, he transforms it constantly and constantly and constantly until it resembles nothing like what it started with, until it comes full circle back to the beginning. And this piece was written as his response in 1945 to seeing the city of Dresden destroyed by Allied bombs. Then after an intermission, the already referenced Four Seasons explores the change of the seasons. And this piece needs no introduction, one of the best known classical pieces of all time. And it is certainly not my intent to be putting myself in the role of soloist again and again with the orchestra, but this piece being what it is, coming near the holidays, it's perfect. And I chose it also because it really showcases the string section of the orchestra as well. The next program, we go even smaller, and this I call Contrast. And this program is inspired a little bit by the Met Chamber Ensemble concerts that we used to do with James Levine, although not hopefully influenced by the sheer length of Jimmy's concerts. But I chose this because Wagner's Siegfried Idyll, Wagner was, of course, famous for his huge music dramas running 5-6 hours with enormous orchestras. Siegfried Idyll is the little chamber piece he composed for his wife's birthday with a group of pickup musicians arranged around the staircase in their home in Lucerne. And when she came downstairs, it was played for her. So this is 13 players, the loveliest music you can imagine, followed immediately by a Shostakovich piece that's not very well known, involving some of this, and I say this affectionately, some of the ugliest and most raucous music you will ever hear, but utterly dynamic and thrilling 10 minutes. Now, we know Shostakovich lived an oppressed life where much of his music was censored by Soviet authorities, and he had to write music that gave them the communist victories that the authorities wanted while having a hidden inner message that conveyed the pain of the Soviet people. This he wrote before the age of 20, before any of that happened. So this is unfiltered, and although the Wagner and the Shostakovich couldn't be more different, they're connected by the fact that these are pieces that composers wanted to write. They were not for any public consumption. These were really unfiltered composers' thoughts. Then in the second half, we venture a little bit into the world of jazz, although it's still very classical. Stravinsky wrote a famous piece called A Soldier's Tale, L'Histoire du Soldat, which is for an ensemble of 7 players with a conductor and 3 narrated parts. The narrator, the soldier, and the devil. And what we're going to do is A Fiddler's Tale, which is Wynton Marsalis, the famous jazz trumpeter, his take on the Stravinsky. And instead of the soldier, we have the fiddler. So we have the narrator, the fiddler, and the devil. And so the brass playing is jazz influenced, the violin part is bluegrass influenced, but it retains very much the sound of the Stravinsky and the exact same layout of the movements, just transformed into his own language. So in a nutshell, the Marsalis is a little bit of what we're trying to do here in Montclair, is have the old and the new meet together with great music that holds its own, where it needs no apology for a gimmick. It's music that stands on its own 2 feet, but maybe the general public doesn't know, and it's worthy of introduction. Along those lines, the 4th program I'm calling Balletic Reinvention, because here we have 2 pieces by Russian composers where the music of other composers has been regurgitated, reprocessed, reinvented, renovated, renewed. In Pulcinella, where we usually hear the symphonic suite, this is a ballet that he wrote, 1-act ballet, after the music of Giambattista Pergolesi, an 18th century Italian composer. So the complete ballet features 3 vocal soloists, a soprano, a tenor, and a bass, and this will be an opportunity for us to collaborate with the Linneman Young Artist Program at the Met. So connecting with my other existence, we can feature some young soloists in this and tell the complete story rather than just parts of the ballet. At the same time, it features a concertino of solo string instruments, 5 string instruments sitting in the center alongside the other string and wind instruments that are soloists. So we can feature a few soloists from the orchestra as well. Then, after intermission, if you say to yourself, I thought Carmen was composed by Georges Bizet, you would be correct. The Carmen Suite is a one-act ballet by the Soviet composer Rodion Chedrin that he wrote for his wife, who was a prima ballerina in Russia at the time. And this is for entirely string orchestra, except it adds 4 percussionists, each of which will have their own zip code on stage, and an entire battery of mallet instruments, marimbas, gongs, drums, pots and pans, and it will present all the familiar tunes of Carmen, but reinvented in a different way. Then our season finale, I call a tour of colors. It's a little bit of a world tour, and it's a little bit of a demonstration of the different colors of the orchestra. So, lacking a better idea, I called it a tour of colors. So you have Ravel's Tombeau de Couperin, which is another homage to an earlier composer. Couperin was a Baroque period French composer. And Ravel actually wrote this for piano. So in orchestrating it, he was reprocessing his own music. Tchaikovsky's Mozartiana Suite was a tribute to Mozart, his favorite composer. So after intermission, it made perfect sense to go to Mozart himself. And the Serenata Notturna is a little light divertimento piece with a string orchestra, but it features the timpani, the kettle drums, which gives it an extremely distinctive color, especially when he combines the pizzicato, the plucked sounds, with those drums. And finally, Darius Milhaud's Le Bœuf sur le Toit, or The Ox on the Roof, which gave birth to a Parisian cafe by the same name, is a piece that was inspired by the time he spent in South America with tango rhythms, Brazilian rhythms, and it brings us full circle to the French start of the program, and I think it's just a fun-filled way to end the season. Incidentally, the music was originally composed with the intention of being the soundtrack to a silent Charlie Chaplin film. It never came about, and it was used instead for ballet music, but that was the original inspiration behind the piece. Okay, so I'm probably well outstayed my welcome, but that's our season. I'm very excited about the programming. Looking forward to each and every one of them in a different way. So, since we've talked so much about music, let's hear a little bit more music. The last 2 movements of the Debussy Quartet. The slow movement, Andantino doucement expressif. Andantino, sweetly expressive. If you know the famous Debussy piano piece, Au clair de lune, it has a lot of that color. It's even in the same key, D flat major, just extraordinarily beautiful and very fragile. The last movement starts very strangely, weird chromatic, slithering sort of things where you're not sure where it's going. That's the très modéré, a very moderately section. Then en animant peu à peu, in gaining life little by little, I call it kind of a drunken, staggering beginning, and it's maybe that's the wine connection, but gradually it gains steam and goes into très mouvementé avec passion, very moving and with passion, and it launches the last movement proper, and at the end you hear all the themes from the earlier movements bring the piece to a triumphant close. So here is the second half of the Debussy Quartet. Thank you so much.
right, so just to finish up, just a couple more slides here. Why are we doing this in Montclair? Well, like I said before, Montclair is a arts and culture mecca here in northern New Jersey. We have collaborative opportunities with the film festival, the art museum, and other regional institutions, and we have already started into a lot of those discussions, working with the film festival, possibly towards the 18th festival, the art museum, towards some other collaborative projects as well. The educational opportunities that exist with Montclair State University, not just with musicians, but with other outreach programs where some of their students may be able to assist, Rutgers as well. This is a very unique community where we have the perfect mix of cultural support in town, philanthropy in town, and the educational opportunities for the students. This is not something you see in very many places, not just here within the New York metro area, but really anywhere around the country or around the world. This is something very unique to Montclair, and it's one of the reasons that these types of programs do so well here, is because it's so well supported. This is a rare opportunity for these highly trained musicians to demonstrate what is possible outside of the traditional orchestra type environment. So this is going to be a fully paid orchestra. It's not fully professional, it's a semi-professional orchestra, but it will be fully paid. So even our amateurs and our students will be receiving some compensation. So how is it going to be funded? It's a combination of things like most nonprofit organizations. It's the support of the community and the region, individual donations from the community members, from people in the region. Corporate and local sponsorships, so a lot of the local businesses, as well as some of the larger corporations in the area, providing that type of support. Foundational support and grant funding from government and other institutional grants, and then of course the federal, state, county, local arts funding where it's applicable. So what can you do as people that are interested in seeing a program like this do well in Montclair and see it thrive, see it prosper? Spread the word. we're a small, new organization, and the biggest thing for me has been making sure that the majority of our funding, as we take in those donations, we take in ticket sales, that money is going towards the musicians. Big organizations, you've got marketing departments that are spending thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars trying to get more money in. And I don't want to do that. We want to do this through a grassroots effort. I don't want to spend money on advertising where we don't need to. I want it to be something that is appreciated by the community and that the community knows about. And the only way we can do that is through a grassroots effort, spreading the word through your friends, your family, your co-workers, that sort of thing. We do have a social media presence, so if you're on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, follow us on those types of platforms. We also have an e-newsletter which you can sign up for, which will give you updates as to events that are going to be coming up, both concerts as well as other community type events where we may be participating. Attend performances, of course. When we start performing, our inaugural concert is going to be in October, and I'd love to see all of you there. Making sure that those performances are fully attended. Donate. As a nonprofit, a substantial portion of our funding does come from donations, and we do have. This is the part where I have to do my job. We do have the ability to take donations today if you're willing to do that. It can either be through a check or through a credit card transaction. We do have that capability at the back of the room as you're leaving today, and you can also do that online at your own convenience. And volunteering, if you feel inspired to help out, please let us know. You can contact me. You can contact the organization. Do it online. Do it through phone. Whatever means makes sense to you. There's all sorts of volunteer opportunities that we really need all of your help. So from there, that's everything that we have for you. I want to take a moment now to once again thank the Montclair Public Library for hosting us, and in particular, I want to once again thank Quartet 212 for being here and for that incredible performance.